Good evening. The Saline Planning Committee will now commence. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Young, absent. Carroll.
Here.
Fosdick, absent. Marl.
Here.
Gearba. Here. Cole. Here. Heft, absent. Troika.
Here.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended or distributed?
I'll move to approve the agenda as distributed, Mr. Chair. I do want to remind the body, because I wasn't notified or made aware until this afternoon, that we had 3 absences and then 1 vacancy. So every motion this evening will require a unanimous vote in order to move forward, okay? So again, I'll move to approve the agenda as distributed.
I'll second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes of November 29th as amended or submitted?
Move to approve as submitted.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Public comments. Under Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comments. Persons requested but not required to state their name and address for the record. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Seeing none, we'll move on. New business. Election of officers.
Mr. Chairman, I received, along with, I think, Recording Secretary Katnick and Community Development Director Harrington, a message today from our chairperson, Ms. Young, and I spoke to her a couple weeks ago. She would like to be considered as chairperson. So in light of her message, what I would offer from the floor then is a motion to elect the same slate of officers for 2024 that served in 2023. So that would be Young as chair, Carroll as vice chair, and Fosdick as secretary-treasurer.
I would be happy to make that motion.
I'll second.
Very good. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. 24-02, application from Alan J. Scott of Rand Construction for a combined site plan approval to construct a 2-story addition to an existing industrial building at 1465 Woodland, parcel number 18-12-30-300-001.
Absolutely. So the current occupant of that space at 1465 Woodland Drive is Liebherr Aerospace. It is action item 2402. It's a combined site plan. And as you mentioned, the applicant is Rand Construction Engineering. The current property is located between Woodland and Maple Road, excuse me. It's south of the currently ongoing Bella Terrace development. It is 54.6 acre parcel that Liebherr hopes to fully develop over time, and the applicant may be able to speak to that. It received a very similar preliminary approval in 2019 that was slightly larger in scope. However, the plan had to be resubmitted as that one has expired. The request is a combined site plan, so the Planning Commission approves or denies a formalized site plan based on zoning requirements, appearance, engineering reviews, and specific concept. If approved, the applicant must make changes based on the conditions established, as well as modifications in the event of conflicts with the state building code or concerns of the city engineer during the construction review process. If any proposed change after an approval is found to be material, the applicant will be required to request a site plan amendment from the Planning Commission. So the applicant's proposal is a 30,000 square foot addition to the existing building in the northeast corner of this specific parcel, as well as the addition of 41 new parking spaces. So here's an image of that proposal, as well as the parking spaces the parking additions are highlighted there as well. And then I know this is not organized in the most common sense way. I would have rather had done north, south, east, west, but PowerPoint designer had different ideas for me. But as you can see, it's a fairly standard industrial building. So the Planning Commission is expected on preliminary and final site plans to approve or with or without conditions or deny the application based on the purposes, objectives, and requirement of the City of Saline ordinances and standard specifications. The items we usually look at are area, width, height setbacks, I'm not going to read them all, just to save you some time, but I will leave the slide up for a minute. So after the staff review between myself, Sally Boss from OHM, and Mike Auerbach from Carlisle Wortman, we identified three main concerns, or three main items to address. So parking and loading. We would like the applicant to confirm the total floor area applicable to the city standards for parking and correct the plan if necessary. There's just some discrepancy over whether the second floor area was being counted, but there's also items on there that would not count against the parking area requirement that were storage or warehousing areas. The applicant should verify the number of proposed parking spaces on the plan. I believe there was a 1 or 2 discrepancy between the number shown on the plan and the number listed. And then the applicant is proposing a 21-space overage as well as 1 loading space overage from what our city code would usually recommend. So the Planning Commission must determine if that's appropriate. In addition, there's landscaping. The Planning Commission should determine whether additional landscaping is needed around the detention bond and the building foundation. And then lastly, for the floor plan and elevation, alternative exterior materials must be provided that meet Section 7.16 requirements for the front and side elevations. Our code lists specific materials that need to be used on the exterior of industrial buildings. And then additionally, the Planning Commission will need to determine if a parapet feature must be provided along the building's eastern roof line. All that considered, our recommendation is to move to approve the combined site plan application for Rand Construction, Alan J. Scott, Liebherr Aerospace with the following conditions. The first 2 are standard. They're on everything we approve. The applicant is responsible for pulling permits. And then 2, the approval shall be valid for a period of 365 days from the date of approval and be no effect unless a building permit is pulled, and then 365 days after the issuance of building permits if a construction has not begun. Item number 3 is the applicant must confirm the total floor area applicable to the city's parking requirements and correct the site plan if necessary. Condition 4, the applicant must verify or correct the number of proposed parking spaces listed on the site plan. 5 is that alternative materials must be provided. For item number 6, before beginning construction plan review, the following items shall be provided. This is the new way that I'm going to be listing kind of the larger engineering requirements. They are important, again, but they're more important for staff than they are for the planning element of this project. And then item number 7, any items identified by the building department in the review shall be corrected before they're beginning construction. And then some conditions that could be dependent on your discussion. A reduction in parking to 85 spaces shall be provided. On-site landscaping must be provided to screen. And then lastly, a parapet feature must be provided. But the items that I think are most important that the Planning Commission addressed are kind of based off those 3 conditions. Is the applicant's proposed overage and parking appropriate? Should that landscaping be provided in about the parapet? I think the staff likely believes the applicant knows their parking situation better than we do, but the applicant should confirm the floor area accuracy. But other than that, provided the parking is still within the limit, staff has no concerns. As for the landscaping, if additional landscaping is asked for, I would recommend that you target it around the areas that are adjacent to the residential areas to just prevent any claims of nuisances. I know that the applicant has discussed with me the potential of a berm being put in, but that's a later conversation. And then lastly, about the parapet being on the eastern roof line. If you look at the site, the eastern perspective that's outlined in Carlisle Wortman's report is very helpful to look at. It shows those elevations. It's primarily visible from Liebherr's other buildings on the adjacent parcel, as well as the industrial portion of Woodland Drive. So it's more of an aesthetic consideration for the Planning Commission. I don't necessarily have an opinion one way or the other.
Is there any functional aspect to the parapet?
My understanding is that parapet just hides mechanical equipment.
That would be really one of the only practical reasons for the requirement. There's separate language about rooftop mechanical screening, but that's really the only purpose it would serve with a flat roof or low pitch roof.
And will a variance be required for the exterior cladding? I know that was the case a few years ago.
It would be,
Okay.
or they could submit the updated elevations.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Just a couple. Ben, in here, it's mentioned in here, and maybe OHM, you can answer this question. He talked about looping the main, the water main. That's not part of a condition in here, and I wanted to make sure that it should be.
So we did run the water model this past week, and there appears to be, based on the model, and well, I know we're updating your model right now, but based on the 2016 model, there is a slight improvement in fire flow if you loop the main. We did just talk to Engineer Humphries this week about that. She has not gotten back to me on what they want to do yet, but there is a slight improvement by looping that main around the building.
So we could add that as a condition tonight, too?
I believe so.
Okay. Also, part of the thing talks about the materials and the change and everything. How is that going to be addressed? The one section in there where there's like significant variations?
Right, they would have to submit a revised elevation in compliance with the materials listed in section 7.16.
And there isn't any need for the, I keep forgetting, the covenants board to meet? We do not have a covenants for this?
I don't believe this is parcel would be in the covenants. It was privately purchased from I think it was actually part of Layer Farms at one point. I could be
It was.
incorrect.
Oh, yeah, that's right, it was. Which may be a different issue on the next one. And then the last question is, this whole parcel is considered part of this site plan, correct? The whole thing, all the way, it stretches all the way over to Maple?
Yes, technically.
At what point would we be requiring them to install a sidewalk along Maple to connect with what's?
Oh, that is a good question. I don't have an answer for you at that time. I know that, as the applicant can speak to, Liebherr's plans are to build 3 more virtually identical buildings on this campus, and then the next one would be further down on the west end of this parcel. So perhaps at that time when the use actually arrives at the street, but we could always talk about moving that up if that would be of interest to the commission.
And then my other question would be is regarding the traffic plan. Do we address anything about the traffic coming onto Maple? Is there any consideration of that? Do we know how many more employees are going to be added as a result of this addition?
So there's still no access through Maple at this time. They're not proposing access out to Maple with this addition, I don't believe.
That'd be a question for the applicant. I know on the street view, there's a gate there. Whether that's an emergency access gate, I would need to check, but
Because when I was reading through here, it kept mentioning access to Maple, so I just want to make sure that whatever that means doesn't be impacted by whatever additional traffic that can come onto that intersection.
sure. Well, another question could be, as it relates to the parking as well, also how many additional employees the addition will bring.
That's it for me. Thank you.
Any other questions? Is there a motion to accept the memos dated January 18th?
Yep, I'll second, Mr. Chair.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Would the applicant like to address these?
Make sure the green light is illuminated at the base.
Yeah, it is now.
Perfect.
Just that I can answer every question you guys just had. So if you'd like answers to all that, I can do it now, or you
Go
just
ahead.
approved it and
No, go ahead.
rock on. A couple things. One, I'm going to walk around with show and tell like I usually do.
That's fine.
So like Ben said, and you guys have seen, I know you've been here, and you've been here, and Bear's been here. All right, so ultimately, Liebherr, you all know this plan. Liebherr exists over here and has for almost 30 years, right? And then they bought 54 acres. So we built that center sleeve first for their,
Gear technology, isn't it?
transfer. No, gear was going to be
You
this
there?
one.
Okay.
Where we got in talks with all the neighbors and had a big bunch out here, there's nobody here today. But, anyway, so this is still aerospace, but it's, the heat transfer, like the stuff that keeps us warm in the airplane, that's what this division's doing. And so they're building on just this east side here now. But do plan, ultimately, to have I would say, when I was younger and GE was a big name, all the things that GE did here in the U.S., Liebherr does in Europe. So they have refrigerators, they have trains, they have airplanes, they have everything. So the crane, you guys have seen them, the trucks and the mining trucks. So each of these could be a different trains, this could be trucks, this could be here. So that's the plan for how this will develop. So again, we're just building one of this sweet campus. Hopefully I develop the roundabout, hoping it goes that way, I'm not sure. But anyway, first thing I wanted to say was, show you that. You're familiar enough with that. And then secondly, there was a point about, Okay, so when we did come in 2015 and we got approval to build the facility as presented, we did get a variance, I think, and we were approved at 36% shortage because it is a industrial building. It does have, sadly, what your ordinance calls siding, we call, architectural metal panel because it's 2 inches thick, it's got detail to it, it's not the crinkle wall of old days. I've said that before in here. But what we want to do, I've continued to have meetings with Lee Bear since we got this meeting set up because we're developing the plan and details and everything else. So this is another building that we built in our neighboring town, Pittsfield, and it's got these sunshades on it. One, it's an architectural feature, but two, it does help cut down some sun. And Lee Bear's kind of getting cooked a little bit in that building. So we are going to add this, and this is after I had my stuff in the bin. Because again, we were struggling through the holidays. I wanted to get on this meeting worse than anything. And for the first time in my illustrious career, as you guys, as the Dans were stating up here, 2 projects in the same town on the same night at the same meeting. It's the first time in my career. But anyway, sunshades. So we're going to add these to every strip window, the existing building and the addition. So that brings us mathematically right back to the 36% that you formally approved for the building. Okay, so that's the answer to the materials question. Okay, I had a conference call earlier today with both my civil engineer and architect for the project. And the civil engineer did have a younger fellow in assistance and did screw up the math on the parking. So the parking, great catch. The parking as listed at 106 is 100% accurate. You're right. My guys goofed up. They'll fix that on the drawings. They did not count the mezzanine. So I had both Carl and Tim on the phone and yes, you're right. Screw up. We'll fix that.
So it's less parking?
No, it's more. It's what we show.
Okay.
Is it there? Who's driving the TV here? Is that you, Ben? Or can you bring that back to the early slide? Yeah. Oh, right there. So
Okay. That's accurate.
That's accurate. That's what we need, staff-wise and square footage-wise. That's what we need.
Just for this addition, or does that added parking accommodate future growth on site?
No. Because this whole building here has about this much office, and it's 2-story.
Yep.
This is going to be exactly the same, about this much office, 2-story. So for these 2 sleeves of this building, we never did build this. It was like pre-drawn there, but we didn't do it. So we're going to finish that, and we need to add this to accommodate these bodies. Then, and again, you just saw the master plan as I walked it by. When we build the 3rd sleeve right here, then this will continue on and then, exit out toward
Gotcha.
Maple. All right. And I heard the question about traffic toward Maple. Yeah, no, they don't exit there. UPS does and FedEx does, but it was primarily required by the fire department, so that's why that gate's over there. People don't come in. They certainly don't come in there. Their employees don't come in there. I can't say that 1 or 2 might not sneak out there, but it is not their traffic pattern. They go out through the main building on Woodland. Probably doesn't matter Hill of Beans, but on the computer screen here, this particular building is 1465A. But I think it's correct in the application, just not on the screen. And then there was one more question. What was the one more question? Oh, one more show and tell piece for this job. Project. All right, I'll walk this around just a little smaller. So, again, with this campus thing, hold up your ways. There's short parking over here too in their original building. And so we already have approved through them in the community here, and add for parking here. And we planned to get after it last year, to be honest, Rand did. But in the end, we were like, no, let's move to next year. So that's now. So when the spring breaks, we'll do this, but I personally have a 20-year relationship with Lee Bear. So if you guys have seen this, I know you've been around, you might have been to their open houses and what have you. I affectionately call this Mount Lee Bear. So Mount Lee Bear was going to get trucked off wherever. But again, we keep talking with Lee Bear. Lee Bear is has instructed us, no, let's take that and start building a berm here to separate ourselves from the residents, even though Lee Bear was first by 30-plus years. They'll start being like, oh, I see a building back there. Forgive me if you're one of them, but I see a building. Anyway, so they're going to start building a berm back here, you know, in a forward format to, you know, aid in good neighbor policy. So that's where that's going to go. Why am I saying that? That was a question relative to landscape and whatnot. So we'll burn that, and as it gets burned as part of this project, we'll fill it with evergreens and we'll have the evergreen. I think I hit all the questions, but if I missed one, please ask me.
Sidewalk on Maple.
Oh, yeah, as Ben said, he alluded to it. I've already shown this twice with the 4-building thing. Like the mayor said, you know, we did have, I'll come closer again. Rand, not me, because I was probably diapers, but anyway, Rand built this original piece right here, and then we added on. And then somebody knew somebody, so we didn't build that. That went bad, Rand's back, we built that, and I just lost my train of thought again, getting a little sus.
Sidewalk on Maple Road.
Okay, sidewalk. What I wanted to walk over here and say is this piece that we didn't build is actually a separate company. It is Lee Bear, but it's Lee Bear Gear. All the rest of this blue stuff is Lee Bear Aerospace, and all this green is aerospace too with HX division. This white piece is gear. We were in here a couple years back to develop even more than this. Was like one more swing we were going to do a fourth. It was a beast for gear. But then the German economy went sideways or something, I don't know, whatever. So now we're not building it. At least it's not on the radar even still. I do communicate with them now and again, but we're not building it. So if we would have done that, we would have done the sidewalk. The sidewalk was on that site plan approval. But until we get anywhere near the street, I mean, I realize it shouldn't become residents, I do, but there is a cross path and all that over to the other side of the road currently. So we're planning to do one now, but we would, obviously.
Yeah, and I think what our expectation will probably be that we want it within a certain number of years, probably. Because the expectation is all of that is becoming residents and all access to get to your properties and stuff. If people want to come to the city, it isn't dependent upon them developing the property as much as the need for it, based on our community standards for, even for reshow, and making that for sidewalk.
Understood.
Forward.
Right, and I can add that the property immediately south of this campus was just annexed into the city and will likely be here for a site plan review at some point this year, so.
Is that the house?
Yes,
Former daycare.
it's an apartment maintenance facility.
When Mr. Harrington and I met with senior staff at Lee Bear back in, I think it was June, right before I left for Europe, they indicated that this project was forthcoming. They asked us not to make any sort of public announcement, which, of course, I'm very excited that we've gotten to this point in a 6-month period. Is it still the intent to have this addition operational by the last quarter of 2024?
I prepared a schedule of values for senior management, and I have it going through June of '25.
Okay. I think that was my only question. We've dealt with the parking. Could you fast forward, Mr. Harrington, a few slides to an added condition about landscaping around the detention pond? Yeah, I would be supportive of that. That's just my personal preference. As it relates to the sidewalk, I do think a sidewalk there is important, but I concede your point that it probably makes more sense to do that when the your technology, aerospace, or automotive develops one of those additional sites or campuses closer to the street. I think that's all I had for the gentleman at the moment.
And I should clarify, I misread our portion of the ordinance related to those roof line measures. So if the applicant does not want to provide the parapet, the condition would be that they would get a variance to provide that ability to not install the parapet.
Can I speak to that one?
Absolutely.
Again, we've built a lot of buildings in this town, and you guys may be familiar with several of them, 2 here tonight. We do a lot of Butler pre-engineered metal buildings, and they can be a single-sloped building, they can be a dual-sloped building, but when they do slope, they slope to a gutter. It is a metal building. So to put a parapet on, in this case, the east, which is just viewed by Liebherr as mentioned, or west, is semi-crippling because all the water's going that way to the gutter. And in this particular case, yes, it is, there's a pond, there's 2 ponds between 2 buildings that Liebherr owns, so I cannot see, with my own sense of logic, any need for a parapet on the east side of this particular building. But I want to say in advance, when we do the westerly addition to this particular building, same story, it's a sloping building to a gutter, so if there's a parapet there, the gutter would be rendered useless. But we do have a parapet on the south side that was in the renderings. We're extending that. We're moving the Liebherr sign down to the far right end. All the same attractive industrial touches that we do. But these parapets that were potentially suggested are problematic.
How does this actually look different than what you see in these pictures currently of parapet? I mean, this was approved by us, we thought it was okay, and there's no parapets on this.
It may be worth revisiting these standards and how they work in conjunction with the screening standards at some point, because you're right, it would just give the appearance of a flat roof. Again, really, the primary practical benefit would just be to provide screening for any rooftop mechanical equipment. Even though there is another section that speaks to that, that's really the only function this requirement would serve. It does have some, there's some, in a sense, discretion in how this is applied, because it applies to only frontages facing streets, I believe the terminology is. So as we have in our review, there's several frontages here that are relatively visible from the roadway. So the other consideration would just be, how do you want this applied now and consistently in the future? Do you want that screened or not? And if there's unique considerations about roof drainage, a variance could be reasonable if that's the case.
Another consideration to provide the master plan is potentially they would readdress and reestablish frontage on a different street altogether if that cross street was made with the roundabout, as you mentioned earlier. So potentially a condition would be, if and when that street is not constructed, you could set a time frame on it to revisit the issue and require a parapet if that frontage is never established.
But because of the way you're asking the question, I really don't want to have them go for a variance that we can at our level resolve.
Right, so that was my misreading. Or the Planning Commission in this specific section of the ordinance has not provided the ability to arbitrarily decide or not decide. It's not subject to your consideration and review. It's just a requirement in the ordinance itself. But you could establish a condition with the knowledge that the applicant intends to build a new frontage road at some point. It's similar to another planning approval I've seen the city do for, in that case, it was Zach's Car Wash, which ended up being problematic. But we could essentially establish a time frame that either a frontage road is established or a parapet is installed or the ordinance is revisited by the time that even happens. So,
Well, whatever we can do to make it not so complex. I mean, I don't want to create a precedent for something that we don't have to. There's a way to make it easier for you.
okay.
So, I mean, you could make the call that, I mean, the building front, and at least where the sign is, and I think some other standards in here is the south elevation. So you could call that the frontage and decide that the east elevation is not, and then it doesn't apply. Just the thing to keep in mind is if this comes up again in the future, you'll have to make sure, or the future commission will have to make sure to apply that standard similarly. So in short, you could decide that, I think the east-facing frontage doesn't count, essentially.
Does that need to be made a condition, or can we just agree to that and?
I think you could just determine that, and you could put it a part of your motion that the the parapet is not required on the east elevation.
And I can make a note, we've changed how we organize all of our planning approvals going forward, so I can make a note of it in the same permitting system that we have for code enforcement and for building permits, so that
No, I think-
we'll have better records retention of that.
I mean, the parapet thing always has been a concern more towards Michigan Avenue and the very,
Exactly.
very observable things that you can see in the community.
Yep.
One other thing that, Ben, if you could answer, you were showing where you hadn't completed the parking lot to the east of the building. You said that you're going to be doing that. Is that something that's already been pre-approved and part of this 106 count, or is it?
I'll speak.
Because I'm looking at this thinking, is there something that we already approved and we just haven't done it, including as part of this?
So the size of the parking lot adjustment that Lee Bear made independent of this specific approval met the criteria for an administrative site plan approval, and then still needed to be reviewed by OHM and our engineers for soil erosion purposes as well as stormwater considerations, but I can let him speak to the 106 count.
What I said about moving forward is that when the westerly sleeve, as I call it, addition is put on the building, that parking will continue up the way.
Right, I understand.
Then,
More on the east side, or what I would call the east side of the building, that you would identify, so you hadn't done that.
oh, yeah, well, with, again, Ben's help and research and a change you folks have made in your zoning, we had a site plan approval that was approved to build the center, the east, the west, and all the parking. But because of COVID and all the other stupid things that have happened in between now and then, Lee Bear, like everybody else, took a pause. And in that pause, we missed the window to keep going. So it was all approved. I have a fully approved site plan to build the whole thing. It's now expired.
That's why I wanted to make sure that was the situation.
That's why we're back here. Yep.
And then the only other thing, Ben, when you discussed, and this is for Ben, the 36% that was previously approved, can you address what that percentage is?
I would need to look at that more closely. I'm not familiar.
For the elevation materials. So I believe, I'll have to look up the specific language, but when there's an addition over a certain, that exceeds a certain percentage of the floor area of the building, or I want to say is over 1,000 square feet, then the addition needs to meet the ordinance requirements for the elevation materials. So even if there was a previous approval because of the size of this addition, it has to comply.
I just want to make sure how this plays out in all of our other buildings that are, even the next one we're going to talk about. So, okay, thank you.
Any further discussion, comments?
The only thing if I was to move this forward for approval and conditions, would be to add the looping requirement, and to also address the, what was the issue? I don't know if Donna got it. There was another item that we were going to talk about a second ago.
Was it the
Parapet?
The parapet thing, sorry.
But it doesn't even a condition. I would just acknowledge that the south elevation is being considered the front.
I agree with the looping. I would add the requirement for landscaping around the detention pond.
Yes. Oh, actually, that's the question. Is the landscaping efficient, or do we need to put a fence, based on the elevation and everything else, but the slope?
I would need to look at that, but due to the proximity of this project to the county drain, it's actually a county reviewed project, so they're going to have jurisdiction over whether it ultimately needs a fence or not.
Okay, so that will, so we don't have to say anything on that.
No, that'll be addressed in the construction plan review.
Can we Google that real quick? I think we have a fence around it already.
You may have to, I can't tell.
I already have Google up, so.
I know we do on the original pond for a fact, but I can't remember. I think it's.
It does look like there's
Yeah, I
a
think you
fence
do.
on it from the aerial that I'm looking at
I
right
think
now.
you do.
Yeah.
I don't often drive back onto Lee Bear's campus. It's not super visible from the road.
Okay, so with those two additions, I think, as I said, I'll move this to approve with those, with the existing conditions and then all the others.
I'll second. So just that I'm clear, and that the committee or commission is clear. So then it's the 7 enumerated items. We're not addressing the parapet. We agree on that issue via consensus, and we're addressing landscaping then and the looping of the water main. Is that correct?
Is that appropriate enough to just say looping of the water main?
Can I ask on that one just for a moment? Because that's hitting me blind. Sally, between you and Tesha, that's something that the community's been looking at, and is there I know where the water dead ends, because I built it, and I know where it dead ends today, and I know that ultimately we would be looping it through that road that's not constructed yet. So, I mean, the goal was always to loop it. So to do it early, is there a deficiency that's driving it, or is it we wish we had it?
I would need to confirm with Engineer Humphreys. She did just ask us to run the model and see what the differences were, and there is an improvement in fire flow back there. I have not had a chance to connect with her since we gave her that information to see whether she wants it addressed now or in the future.
And I know from our perspective, and how we discuss it, we're looking for efficiencies, because when we have these dead ends, it's becoming a significant issue, and there's water clarity, and it causes, those, may not just impact that small area, it can affect the whole area surrounding it, and with other businesses in that area, we need to make sure the water stays.
I do appreciate that personally. I build all over the place and have to deal with this all the time. And if we have to do it here, we have to do it here. It's just that, like every other project, we've given them a budget, and it didn't include 1,000 feet of water main. That's where I'm coming from.
You can always add a condition so that it could be resolved during the construction review process, so looping I don't know how we would best phrase that condition, but something to the effect of that water main shall be looped at the discretion of the city engineer during the construction review process. Which I know doesn't resolve your total issue,
No,
but
I just appreciate the discussion. Just let's talk it through.
I know this is one that gets to be a concern when you're doing it combined.
Right.
Have the ability to take that step and
But the updated engineering review standards in the construction review process, we now give us a little bit more authority to then catch some of these engineering-related items after the fact, so.
I mean, I'm just the mover of the motion, but I'd be amenable to that language. But it's up to the mover as well.
Yeah, because the way it's worded in here in the assessment, let's do it that way, but my preference would be
To loop it, right? So.
And I want to add, this is not an issue specific to Lee Bear or this property. As Councilmember Gearbaugh alluded to, we've been very dogged the last 5 years of mandating with every development of the looping of the system, because it will ultimately benefit your client, but
I understand.
Yeah, the city as a whole.
Doing it in a lot of other communities. I get it.
But I think the language that Ben is recommending is a reasonable compromise.
So is that clear for you, Donica? However that is, then we'll adjust it from that perspective, based upon a new review of the water.
Just to comment, you mentioned there will be future expansions. I think looping will absolutely be required, so.
Sure
appropriate
enough.
Budgeted.
Yeah, just didn't have it in this ultra delayed go-round, but we'll see what happens.
Are we ready to vote? All those in favor to approve with conditions?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay, item 24-03, application from Alan J. Scott of Rand Construction to amend an approved final site plan in order to construct an approximately 3,866 square foot addition to an existing industrial facility at 2500 South Industrial, parcel 1812-31-480-016. Mr. Harry.
The current tenant is Condat, as you mentioned, it's 250 South Industrial. It's action item 2403, and excuse, it's not a combined site plan, it is a site plan amendment, technically. The current property is located on the northwestern corner of Beach Court and South Industrial. It's a almost 10.5 acre parcel with an 88,000 square foot building. Just as a point of reference, Condat also owns this vacant lot immediately adjacent to it, to the west. And the last time this site plan was touched was in 2008, when they received an amendment to build a silo. Not like a different type of silo than what you're probably thinking. Again, the Planning Commission approves or denies based on the general appearance, engineering reviews, and specific concept. The proposal in this case is to build a 3,866.5 square foot cold storage addition to the existing building, as well as it's being placed over an existing concrete pad. There is no proposed new parking. So here's that. It's kind of difficult to see. It's on the western end of the building where the yellow highlights are. If that's visible to you, it's shaded slightly blue, slightly gray. So the last one here are the elevations from the north, the west, and then the south. So aesthetically, the cold storage facility is designed to look very similar. It is technically an amendment to a final site plan, so the same final site plan criteria are in effect here. And this had a little bit more in terms of items that the Planning Commission should address. So the Planning Commission must determine if additional parking should be required. The applicant, as I mentioned, is not proposing any new parking, but they are providing some new building square footage. The greenbelt landscaping must be provided along the beach court frontage, as it was an item that was never previously installed. I believe that the building predates beach court's creation, although I could be incorrect about that, which is likely why that greenbelt standard has not been enforced. For safety paths, we could ask that they consider adding pavement markings or signs to identify pedestrian crossing areas between the buildings and spaces along the western lot line. For lighting, if they're proposing additional exterior lighting, they need to provide an updated illumination plan. For the floor plan and elevations, some of the last one, alternative exterior materials must be provided that meet those section 7.16 requirements. And then for engineering, there are a lot of items that Engineer Boss and our city engineers identified, and they're primarily outlined in the conditions themselves, as you'll see, but the presence of storm sewer requires applicants to proceed with caution, and they will be responsible if it is damaged. So to move through this quickly, we would recommend that you move to approve the site plan amendment of application for Condat Rand Construction with conditions, the same two as last time about they need to pull permits. It expires in 365 days. Item number 3 is probably the most important condition, that any storm sewer damage as a result of construction shall be replaced to existing conditions at the expense of the property owner. 4, that the greenbelt landscaping be provided along the site's beach court frontage. 5, that if additional lighting is being proposed, that they provide a lighting plan, essentially. 6, that the alternative exterior materials are provided. 7 was kind of a lengthy list. I know the applicant says he's already corrected many of these items that will be ready for the construction review process of this. Again, primarily more looking at items for the formal plan set that the city will be keeping on file in perpetuity rather than a real planning consideration, or planning commission consideration, I should say. And then any items identified by the building department shall be corrected before beginning construction. And then some alternates, 61 parking spaces shall be provided. So that would be the applicant providing 2 additional parking spaces than what's currently on site. And then B, you could require the applicant to add pavement markings or signs to identify pedestrian crossings. And those are also the 2 items of discussion. So is the applicant's proposed parking appropriate? It's from my understanding that this is just an accessory to the existing building. They're not planning on hiring new people. It's just an easier manner for them to store items. And generally speaking, I think that the applicant likely knows more about their parking situation. And then should the applicant provide pavement markings? I think that there's an obvious benefit to having defined markings. That said, there's no guarantee on a private property where it's not really being enforced by anybody that people would actually follow the signs and cross at a crosswalk in a parking lot. I'm sure we've all been to a Target before, and I certainly don't cross where Target would like me to. So I think it's neither here nor there. It's kind of more up to the Planning Commission's discretion. Any
Any questions, comments?
Yeah, a couple questions. Consultant Ross, you had mentioned not approving this. I know you had a follow-up with Mr. Harrington. Can you clarify if your concerns are no longer there, or have they been addressed?
So my recommendation was based on the sheer number of comments. Many of these are planned cleanup items that can be addressed later. So it was on the fence for me, but with the number of items I had, it was just a sheer number of items issue.
Which has been an issue with this board significantly in the past, so I want to make sure Mr. Harrington, have a lot of these already been addressed at this point?
Yes, and the applicant can speak to that they've been able to address these items since. And again, I do think that because the items we're specifically looking at aren't like, oh, well, you'll need fix your signage, which is definitely a planning concern. It's more like we need our plan sheet to be in order and clear. That's why we lean more towards the approval and with the knowledge that the applicant then has to go through a different review process subsequent to this meeting with the engineers.
Have we addressed they used to have concerns with outside, I know this is for storage, but they used to have issues with storage, similar to some of our other tenants in the industrial park. Have they?
I have not had that issue with Condat. I have had it with their neighbor to the south. Hopefully Windsor's not watching, but I don't even know if it's actually Windsor anymore, speaking of that. But I have not had issues with, the only code complaint I got was found to be unfounded. It was a noise complaint related to said silo that was approved in 2008, so.
And then the only thing, when I look at this, now that they're putting this addition on next to where basically trucks go through, and I see that our fire chief has signed off on it, has any consideration been for that? Because that potentially could be a hazard. Will that be reviewed as part of the building code?
Right, so the fire chief believed that there was, significant enough room for their trucks to operate in that area, but a truck turning template, I believe, was one of the items asked for. Item C, a turning template shall be provided for the largest vehicle that will enter the site, fire engine, waste removal, semi-truck. But the fire chief, upon looking at the plan, as you saw in that attachment, said that it was substantial enough for him.
I'm not so worried about turnaround, I'm worried about potential combustible underneath that, because I've seen those issues in the past and other considerations. And now we're enclosing that from the, I guess it'd be the west side. It makes for a tunnel of potential issue. And I know Connet deals with petroleum-type products and some of that, I believe. So I would be a little more comfortable to make sure whatever we've done is that's evaluated, that's done as part of building.
The building department will definitely take a look at it, and I can have the fire chief look at it again. If there was a material change, it would have to come back, obviously.
And I'm not worried about a person vehicles getting in and out, I'm worried about one that potentially catches fire, creates a cutoff right there.
No additional questions from the dais, Mr. Chair. I'd move to acknowledge receipt of the memos from the Community Development Director, the Planner, OHM, and the City Engineer.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Hello again. My name is Alan Skinner. I can speak to all those issues as well. One, I want to speak to first, maybe it's the smallest, but maybe to you it's the largest. If you go back and check the aerials, you guys know this is a city of Saline Park. It's where it started, and then you're courting folks to move in there, build, do business, pay taxes. Condat, well, it wasn't Condat, it was Petrolube, we built it, was the first building in the park. So that's why there's no landscaping along the court. The court didn't exist. And I want to show you something that I would like to propose to you in light of that comment and that comment alone. I made up another cartoon, believe it or not.
All of those white bubbles of the number of times we've built for Condat on just the stuff you can see. We've been inside, moved this building, changed that wall, do the server room, modified the lunchroom, on and on and on. But that's a lot of white bubbles and a lot of years of working for a client. So why I wanted to come up here with my cartoon is, his name's Stefan, you gotta deal with there, maybe some of you don't know Stefan real well. But when Stefan called me, he said, come on down, we want to talk again. what he called me for was a 30,000 square foot addition that they've been talking about for about 7 years now. I'm like, yes, you know, we're in the business of building buildings. But by the time we get there and have our first meeting, somebody in France, because, you know, Lieber's German, these guys are French, like, no, change in whatever. We're not gonna do that. Do that next year. Cold storage. So my proposal to you is, when we do the 30,000 footer that approaches this and have to modify the pond and everything to make this work, we put all that landscaping in along the core.
And you think that expansion will be forthcoming in the next,
1 to 2 years. Yep. That's that point, full transparency.
As for the concern about fire, Ben, do you have any elevations in your computer on this one? Okay. I'll come over here.
All right, so again, you guys are familiar. This, this area here is where trucks go in and out, delivering some product through, I don't even know what they are, I'm not an engineer, but tubes and whatever to take product in and out of trucks that, you know, take it from point A to point B. So this space has a dry fire protection system already. We're going to extend the dry fire protection system out into this cold storage area. And even though this is a TV that any of us would like to have on our homes, it's still small for me to describe what I'm going to describe to you. Maybe you can best see it here. We're not taking the siding even to the ground. We're going to take the finished floor elevation that exists here and extend that straight out and do the foundations are going to be piers, and the columns sit on these piers so that air can free flow through there. So that's why we haven't taken, I'm going to the next point, that's why we haven't taken any masonry out there for additional materials. It'd be masonry floating in air. So that's the reason we didn't
Put any masonry out there to dial it up additionally. I think that's each of the questions that's come up.
Oh, I think the other question is the number of conditions.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, to Sally's point. I'm so sorry. Okay, again, full transparency. You've never had any construction person more transparent than this guy. But anyway, I was trying really hard to get this in for site plan approval. So I did hit Ben with site plan light, and you guys were sweet enough to go through it, and Sally's smiling because she knows it's true. But since that day, Design Inc. is the engineer that I've used for every bit of work we've ever done at Condat, different engineer at Liebherr. I got Wayne to complete the entire set. Every comment Sally had is incorporated and more. The set's done, it's complete, it's submittable for engineering review, done deal. Everything she talked about in her report, they're all washed. Yeah.
Can you, going back to the landscaping or the potential addition on the south side of the building, so, because I suspect this body will want to make that an additional condition.
It's already on there.
Oh, is it? Which number is it?
I have to pull it back up. I think it's on the screen right now. It's the-
Number 4 there on the screen.
Right, and again, this is not an item that's the planning commission's discretion to waive. It would have to be given a variance if you wanted to fully exempt them from it. You could establish a timeline for it, I suppose, but.
I would have to check on that. My suggestion would be to require it now.
And then we could just enforce site plan non-compliance if it were never to be installed, essentially. So, but the idea is that it should probably be installed at some point, so.
Yeah, I'll concur or accept the expert's advice. Logically, at least to me, it would seem prudent to mandate it within a certain time period. Ergo, his comments about an expansion likely on the south side of the property within the next 12 to 14 months.
Right.
If it's not possible, it's not possible.
I would add that there's some amount of enforcement discretion on that. shouldn't even say that out loud, but there's some amount of enforcement. When does construction start? When does the site plan need to be in absolute compliance? What are the consequences for that? What is the time frame given to them to bring it into compliance?
I would suspect if you put 3 years on it, Condat would do whatever you ask him to. The other thing I didn't say is we also do plan to take that roadway out to the court, so you have a loop around Condat. So if there is landscaping added, it'll all be kind of easterly.
Right, and the access drive is actually specifically mentioned in the ordinance that it's still, even if you bring the access in, it's still required to be part of that lineal calculation essentially. So again, I would just leave the condition as is, and we can go from there essentially.
So you wouldn't do it, you wouldn't recommend any modification then to item 4?
I would not, specifically because the point of Auerbach's point, it's not, that the ordinance does not provide us the flexibility to delay it on some sort of time frame, unless that's an exception we would want to make for pretty much everybody, and that's the enforcement metric, so.
Point taken.
Any other questions, comments? Is there a motion to approve with?
Just one comment. Does this have to go through the covenants, because this is in Salt Trail?
I would have to look at the covenants committee, but depending on the size, I think the covenants committee has a size cutoff for what it would and wouldn't be reviewed for. It's an internal, you might have done it before, I don't know.
This just barely went beyond the scope of,
The administrative site plan review
Yeah.
process, yes.
thank you.
I just wanted to confirm that, just to make sure that I pick up there.
Good.
I can also say that I'm here in partnership with you because I think like most other people that want cold storage, they just wanted a barn off in the corner somewhere. I'm like, oh, let's make it match the building. Let's attach it. Let's make the, so we're working together here.
I move we approve the project with the attached conditions. Comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Good luck.
Mr. Chairman, if there are no discussion items this evening, I would move to excuse the absence of Chairperson Young, Secretary Treasurer Fosdick, and at-large member Heft.
All those in favor?
Give me a second.
I'll
second that motion.
Troika will second.
Wait.
Troika
There's-
seconds. Yep.
Motion's been seconded.
Yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Can I ask a real quick question before we do? Are we, do we have items pending for February 14th? Should we pencil that in?
There will not be a February 14th meeting. I did receive an application that will be heard at the second meeting in February, which I believe is the 28th.
So we should plan on a meeting on the 28th at 7.
Didn't we delay something, or am
I don't believe we had any items delayed. So at the next meeting, there will be a review for the former UAW hall, which is being proposed as a comprehensive dentistry. That's a group out of Ypsilanti. And then likely a curbside pickup ordinance that you may choose to modify. Or I think we'll propose one in favor and one against, essentially, because I know it is somewhat of a contentious issue. But due to legal advice, we need to resolve that rather quickly. So.
And then you suspect sometime later this spring a proposal for the former island on North Maple adjacent to the Lear property?
Yes, if we don't get a site plan, we'll, again, this is an item to chat with legal about, but it needs to be rezoned. We were waiting for it. We were under the assumption that when it was brought into the city that the site plan would be immediate, but that has not been the case. So we are running into whether we're rezoning it instantly or waiting for the site plan. I'm still working with the property owner on the time frame for that. Don't want to waste time in meetings and notice dollars for no reason, so.
We'll see everybody on the 28th. I'd second Mr. Gearbaugh's motion to adjourn at
I'll change my motion to
8:01.
Before the clock changes, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Please sign the site plans on the tables.
How many copies do we have to sign, Danica?
It's one of each.
Just one of each?
Yes.